Contributing to stroke, COPD, and heart disease, atherosclerosis causes more than 40% of all deaths worldwide. Often undiagnosed, the consequences of atherosclerosis can lead to sudden and fatal complications, traumatizing both individuals, families, as well as healthcare systems around the world. Now, Cyclarity is a platform technology company that aims to deliver a simple and affordable therapy that tackles this silent killer, as well as the root causes of many other age-related diseases. So, wanting to know more, I asked Cyclarity's CEO of Corporate Affairs, Mike Kope, about the company's mission.
We want to save 1 billion lives and change the way that developers and regulatory agencies treat and work on age-related disease. The longer answer, I think, is that Oki and I have worked together for years in rejuvenation biotechnology, managing various projects, research projects and development projects. And we always knew that atherosclerosis was a special case. Atherosclerosis is by far the world's biggest killer. Kills up to 40% of the people worldwide, people dying of all causes, including getting hit by buses. And atherosclerosis may be one of those rare situations where an age-related disease is being driven primarily by a single point cause, which is basically the failure of the cardiovascular self-repair system once it gets overloaded with molecules that it can't properly process, the most toxic of which is forms of oxidized cholesterol in the cardiovascular system.
I wanted to check that it was right to categorize Cyclarity as a platform, so I talked with Dr. Matthew Oki O'Connor, who is the CEO of Scientific Affairs.
So we designed a specialized computational screening platform that's optimized for the kind of molecule that we're studying. We developed something completely unique that allows us to model in silico at various levels of cheap, fast modeling, down to very detailed dynamic simulations, down to simulations that can actually predict the affinity and give us affinity constants, numbers for how strong our drug candidates can grab onto a target molecule that we want to create a drug against. So that's all happening in silico before we go and synthesize a new prototype drug candidate.
We can kind of quantify our specificity in an actual real-life environment. So right now, everything in the computer is more or less relative. Like, I can see that this compared to this is better, this is worse, based on the algorithms that I use. And then we can translate that to the lab, and I can make further connections to determine how those relative quantities from the computer actually translate into the lab, and then we can improve each other in that way.
I would say that Cyclarity is a platform company with a strong computational synthetic chemistry platform with one hell of an asset, UDP-003, a primary drug candidate that we hope will reverse atherosclerosis.
Cyclarity's lead candidate is a cyclodextrin that removes non-degradable oxidized cholesterol, facilitating the removal of plaque. So I wanted to learn more about its primary application.
The kind of molecule that we're working on is called a cyclodextrin. It's a cyclic carbohydrate. And if you've heard of it, you've probably heard of it in medicine in the context of excipients that deliver existing drugs to people in a safe way. There's cyclodextrins that have been made that can be delivered in huge doses, and they're not even very tightly regulated because they're so incredibly safe. So we studied how those molecules work. We figured out what made them so safe. We figured out what it is about the way that they're made, that the regulators accept that, and we tried to mimic those properties of the molecules when designing new therapeutic versions of these. And then the traditional cyclodextrins are very low affinity for their targets, so you just use a lot of them because they're so safe. So what we did is we re-engineered them to actually become quite powerful, and so that they can grab a target with very high affinity. So now we can start to approach the affinity that an antibody can have for its target. So we're building molecules synthetically the way that you build a small molecule drug, but we're mimicking some of the properties of an antibody with the strength and the way that they bind, kind of like a Pac-Man wrapping around the target, rather than a small molecule fitting inside of a binding pocket the way a traditional small molecule drug does. So it's sort of our class of drug that we're developing sits just about halfway between a small molecule and an antibody.
How it works is that it's been designed to have a specific shape that corresponds to the shape of the oxidized cholesterol that we believe is causing macrophages to become foam cells. Now, foam cells make up a large part of atherosclerotic lesions, and they're also pro-inflammatory cell types. So they in turn recruit more macrophages to the site, which become inhibited by the 7kC in the plaque, and this cycle continues until the plaque grows and grows until it bursts and causes a heart attack or stroke.
The lead is UDP-003. UDP-003 is a dimerized and specially formed cyclodextrin molecule that we created with a combination of computational analysis and some synthetic bench chemistry. The computational analysis allows us to put together a variety of different molecules and test them in a virtual world before we spend the time and money that's required in synthetic chemistry to actually put compounds into the bench, and actually helps us accelerate the program. The target here is to design a molecule that's very, very specific to oxidize cholesterol over normal cholesterol, because oxidized cholesterol is the toxic biomolecule that we're trying to remove from the system.
Disease reversal is fast moving from concept to reality in the field of longevity, and I was keen to learn more about Cyclarity's take on this.
This is disease reversal, and this is a good segue into the market conversation as well, because most of what's going on right now is lipid management, amelioration of cholesterol or triglycerides using statins or PCSK9 inhibitors, and then fibrates and CETP inhibitors, despite their problems in the clinic and in phase 4. And all of these are simply designed to control cholesterol levels, control triglyceride levels. There's nothing here that's actually reaching into what we think is the underlying cause when the cholesterol becomes oxidized and starts to defeat the repair system. So what we want to do is actually work underneath that driver and get that out and allow the cardiovascular system, the repair system, to do its job again.
So the exciting thing is that what we're doing is allowing your body's cells, your own immune system, your macrophages, to reinvigorate their self-repair mechanism. So macrophages are quite extraordinary cells. They have the capability to do something called phagocytosis, which is to engulf or eat other cell types and other types of debris. Now, normally macrophages can monitor your cardiovascular system and your vasculature and eat up or engulf some of the cholesterol and calcium that's found there. Now, once they engulf too much of this oxidized cholesterol, what happens is they no longer have the ability to do phagocytosis. What we've been able to show with our experiments in the lab is that application of our compound, and therefore the removal of 7kC from these cells, allows them to regain their phagocytic function. So these cells that were once foam cells, pro-inflammatory, bad guy type cells, are now reinvigorated to be the guardians of your immune system once again. In that way, we think we can actually allow your body to take apart the plaques in a slow, controlled manner from the inside out.
Interestingly, for lack of a better word, we call it constructively disruptive, because there's nothing about this drug that requires an immediate transfer or challenge to standard of care. If you're on statins, stay on statins. We'll put you on our drug. We'll look at the ox call. We'll see if we can do something about that. But the statin standard of care, the PCSK9 standard of care, does not need to be disrupted in order to do that. So we can be additive in the beginning, and hopefully demonstrate that a reversal approach as opposed to an amelioration approach is going to be much, much more effective in saving lives.
So what we know about 7-ketocholesterol, 7kC, is that it builds up over long periods of time, decades. So, and it corresponds to the time period over which you build up atherosclerotic plaque. So perhaps something that most people aren't aware of is that sometime in your mid-30s through your 40s and to the rest of your life, everyone accumulates some amount of atherosclerotic plaque. Those timescales match up with the accumulation of 7-keto-cholesterol. So while we do want to reverse lesions, treat people who already have atherosclerotic disease, eventually we see and envision our compound being used to prevent the accumulation of 7-KC in the first place. So something like dosing people earlier in their lives to prevent 7-keto-cholesterol from ever causing your macrophages to become foam cells and preventing the atherosclerosis before it even starts.
So a very novel and exciting therapy, but how would the therapy be delivered and when?
So in our strategy, we're first going after people who have established disease, and that protocol looks something like 3 to 5 injections over 2 to 3 weeks to knock that level of 7-keto-cholesterol down to baseline, to 0 essentially, and then probably no retreatment again for another couple of decades until the 7-KC reappears. In that intervening time, your immune system, uninhibited by the presence of 7-keto-cholesterol, will be able to not only reverse the atherosclerotic plaque, but continue monitoring your vascular system to prevent the establishment of more plaque.
The cost of heart disease is projected to reach $1.1 trillion by 2035. So what does the market opportunity look like for Cyclarity?
So we have a lead drug that targets oxidized cholesterol that accumulates with age in various cells and tissues with age. And we're focused on targeting it first at atherosclerosis, the thickening of the arteries that transports the blood. Atherosclerosis causes a third to half of all death on Earth, indirectly by being the primary cause of heart attacks, strokes, and lung failure.
Absolutely. It's a really exciting time to be here at Cyclarity, and it's really exciting to be in the area of cardiovascular disease in general. Cardiovascular disease, well, a lot of progress has been made over the last 20 or 30 years with cholesterol drugs such as the statins and PCSK9 inhibitors. Not a lot other than cholesterol management has been addressed. There's been renewed interest and activity in the field, and we're happy to be a part of the next round, the next generation of treatments that hopefully can reverse the disease of atherosclerosis rather than just treat its symptoms.
Atherosclerosis isn't just the world's biggest killer. It may be one of the few areas where an age-related disease is primarily driven by a single point cause. In other words, there's a pretty robust cardiovascular self-repair system working in both of us right now. Macrophages being recruited to the site of an injury will pick up detritus and particles and help to clean up your arteries. When they get overloaded with cholesterol derivatives that have been oxidized cholesterol, or oxchol as we call it, they get overloaded in their lysosomes, they can no longer function, and they explode from these healthy firemen cleaning up the cardiovascular system into these arsonists that become these foam cell, sort of quasi-senescent cells that become the necrotic core of an atherosclerotic plaque, triggering all kinds of inflammaging responses and eventually leading to the rupture and the event that causes the heart attack or stroke.
So what about Cyclarity's technical advantage?
Well, what I think is that the market for cyclodextrins as drugs is almost untouched. There's only one that's been approved so far, and it's just become a blockbuster drug. And I think there's an enormous opportunity to create a new class of drugs that's halfway between small molecules and antibody drugs. And I think that's what our platform allows us to build. Of course, we're focused on age-related disease, and so we're focused on those targets, but there's all kinds of other opportunities for our technology to build all kinds of fantastic new drugs and tools.
And of course, there's the question of the company's go-to-market.
Well, next we're finishing the IND, IMPD enabling work, which is going quite smoothly, and then we'll be applying for IMPD permission to go into clinical trials in the UK and starting our first in human clinical trials middle of 2023. Well, it's mostly a safety trial. We hope to get some anecdotal data about how we impact the arteries, but mostly it's to establish the safety and the dosing that we'll use in the phase 2 trial, where we will be able to look at diagnosed patients and image their arteries and see how they change with the delivery of our drug.
So what about the application of Cyclarity's technology beyond atherosclerosis?
Well, that's what's really interesting to us. These cyclodextrins, that we can tune the affinity and specificity towards any small hydrophobic biomolecule. So we've started with 7-ketocholesterol because it is implicated in atherosclerosis. For instance, there are molecules that build up with aging that cause age-related macular degeneration. And so we're looking into preventing and treating age-related macular degeneration by going after those targets. You can also imagine a whole litany of other molecules, such as environmental toxins that accumulate in a similar way to 7-ketocholesterol, and even things like drugs of abuse that we'd like to tune our platform, or point our platform at, so that we can expand our pipeline and move into the future with a whole new class of molecules. My background is in pharmaceutical development more broadly, and it's really exciting to me to have a class of compounds that we can aim at these type of toxins rather than just doing the normal pharmaceutical development of inhibiting enzymes and proteins that already exist in the human body.
Yeah, well, the idea right now is to build it and validate it and make sure that it works. So the first step was to have a target, which was 7-KC, and an off target, which is cholesterol, because cholesterol is important. So we wanted to make sure that we had specificity for our target. And once we were able to show that we had that, not only in the lab, but also in the computer, we can expand those same methods to get specificity for other targets. So you can do a lot of different chemical modifications to cyclodextrins, and you can go after a lot of various molecular garbage, we like to call it, which builds up as you age. And so ideally in the future we want to use machine learning and AI algorithms to help us come up with these ideas. For now it's more what we can think of is what we're able to test. But in the future, we'll be able to incorporate these other algorithms to expand what we can go after.
I was very interested to learn that Cyclarity was moving into clinical trials in the UK and wanted to learn more about how a Californian company was choosing and why it was choosing to do this in the UK.
Yeah, well, it was a bit fortuitous in that we started out applying in the UK, sort of putting out feelers. The UK seemed to have a friendly regulatory environment in which you could get a lot of interaction, a lot of advice with them. And so for us, we were just trying to go, instead of some people are afraid and intimidated by the regulators. We wanted to maximize our interaction with the regulators because we wanted to find out if we were doing something wrong. We wanted to find out much sooner and much earlier. So we figured we'd talk to regulators in the UK, we'd talk to regulators in the US, we'd get everybody's feedback, and then we'd get going. Well, it just so happened we went to the UK with I guess a somewhat more sophisticated package than they were accustomed to receiving with a first filing. They promoted us up to the second level of meeting immediately. We had a fantastic meeting. We satisfied basically all of their concerns about safety and manufacturing. And we were talking about clinical trials for half of the meeting, and then they invited us to apply for an accelerated regulatory program called the Innovative Licensing and Access Pathway. And so we applied for it immediately afterwards. We're granted the status within weeks. And we were I believe the 8th company that received that new the new program. And we've been a part of it ever since. And so that's led us to change our direction from focusing on U.S. market or U.S. path first to focusing in the UK.
This is a really big time for us because of the ILAP program, the Innovative Licensing and Access Pathway program in the United Kingdom. We're able to get the advice and assistance of a number of different governmental agencies. We'll be able, we believe, to get into the clinic very, very quickly because of that. We're working on we're finalizing our engineering runs right now. We're starting clinical trial material production imminently. We expect to be in the clinic as soon as the middle of next year.
And what's the level of confidence of transitioning into the more important clinical phase?
Well, of course, phase 1 safety, phase 2 dosimetry, that's the classical analysis. But actually, the MHRA, the United Kingdom Regulatory Authority, has actually asked that we include patients with a normal atherosclerotic load in both of these trials. This is extremely good news from our point of view because it means we have a chance to look at impact of our drug in what is essentially, from our point of view, a patient population. Nobody with, of course, diagnosed disease or culprit plaques, but even being able to test this in healthy individuals with a significant plaque load give us a chance to see if we can do some imaging in these trials and see if we can demonstrate some impact.
Cyclarity will be fundraising in 2023, and I wanted to learn more about this and how the company will use the proceeds of this funding.
Yeah, we will be quite soon. We're funded in 2 rounds to about $14 million. That money is quite sufficient to carry us through the IMPD filing, the filing for approval to start your human clinical trials in the United Kingdom, which we'll do about the middle of next year. It won't be enough, however, to go into human clinical themselves. So to run the phase 1 and the phase 2, we'll have to raise in that period about $30 million. Whether we do that in 1 batch or 2 remains to be seen.
So Cyclarity obviously sounds like a very exciting company, and you can find out more about Cyclarity by actually just searching Cyclarity on the Longevity.Technology website. Thanks for watching.